Hey everyone, this is Nevin Kay with the Resist Trump campaign, and I'm very happy to be here today with you guys. We coach activists to lead lawful, nonviolent civil resistance to Trump and his enablers, and this is the official podcast of the campaign. Today, we're going to start with a bit of a rundown of the news to tell you kind of what's been going on in the world today. So first, unfortunately, there was news that we heard that Jesse Jackson, a charismatic champion of civil rights and a household name, has passed away at age 84. Rest in peace, Mr. Jackson. We also learned that Stephen Colbert has called out CBS regarding the fact that CBS banned him from interviewing James Tallarico, a candidate for Senate in Texas, on The Late Show, which is really surprising news to me. We also have learned that Kristi Noem's use of Coast Guard resources has affected her relationship with the military branch. A lot of stuff in the media going on, kind of connected to Stephen Colbert as well, in that it looks like Anderson Cooper has declined to sign a new agreement with CBS News and will no longer be a part of 60 Minutes. Other things that have happened in the news, we had Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, who forced the ouster of a senior Army spokesman in a recent internal clash. And then back to the Epstein scandal, Hillary Clinton has accused the Trump administration of a cover up in a recent BBC interview. So lots of stuff going around the world, and it's my pleasure to be able to introduce our next guest on the podcast. Our guest is Jimmy Flannigan, who is a resistance leader, a champion of police and housing reform, and the first openly gay man to serve on the Austin City Council. And quite possibly one of my favorite of his credentials is thinking back to one of the first protests that my resistance group, Resist Austin, based in Austin, held, which was a protest at Tesla. Um, Alex Jones, the jokester, provocateur, showed up, and the Honorable Jimmy Flanagan got right up in Alex Jones's face while banging a very large cowbell, and it was quite an experience. So, guys, it's my pleasure, Jimmy, to have you here on the podcast today. How are you today?
Thank you, Nevin. I am fantastic.
Good,
I am feeling great. I am hopeful about the world. It is
good,
possible.
good, good. I love to hear it. Jimmy, before we jump into an interview, any reflections on some of the news that I shared earlier in the podcast today?
I had not heard that just Jesse Jackson had passed away. That is stunning. The man was truly an icon of civil
Yeah,
rights. In some ways, pardon the gay parlance here, but in some ways, he was the diva of civil rights, the civil rights movement. Certainly, a few decades ago. I mean, truly, like he also played this really weird role, and you could see this in media, in certain shows from like the '90s, where somebody would say something wrong or untoward towards the black community, and then he would show up like the black Superman to negotiate and mediate and try to like educate folks. And I mean, the guy really walked into difficult spaces and made big swings in an era where it wasn't easy to do so. So truly a loss to the movement.
yeah, and he actually ran for president, I think in '88, if I'm not mistaken. I think he
He
did.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, really bold and very powerful, influential leader that unfortunately we've lost. Um, so may he rest in peace. Any other reflections on the news that you heard today, Jimmy?
I was just watching the Stephen Colbert. I generally watch it the next day in the morning, and he did a whole thing about James Tallarico, and of course, I know James. I was on city council while he was. I mean, he's still a House member, but I was on council when he got elected to the House out of the suburbs north of
Mm.
Austin, and it was wild because he did the whole segment with somebody else's photo over James's name in the corner in the thing. And I, as a Texan, I was like, "Oh my God, what's happening? He's screwing it up!" And then of course it was a bit. They knew exactly what they were doing because the FCC apparently had told them not only could he not interview James Tallarico, he couldn't even have a photo of James Tallarico on the broadcast.
That's
But I
insane.
mean, Colbert epically, like the number of times he said James Tallarico was just like over and over and over again. Really, really well done, really funny. I mean, and I love Jasmine Crockett too, but it was just like a really well done moment. And I'm living, I will say, I'm living for Colbert's no F's left to give as he and heads towards his May cancellation.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing how the media landscape is changing under this Trump regime's new FCC policies. So let's jump into some questions for you, Jimmy. We had talked a little bit about starting things off with like a kind of a question about I forget what it was actually. It was a we wanted to have a like a special kind of question about I think it was what do you resist, and it can't be a political thing. What are you resisting right now? And I'm curious what you think about that.
Thank you. Uh, I'll tell you what I'm resisting right now. I'm resisting the Willy Wonka chocolate factory expanding in my pantry. My husband is cute and skinny like Johnny Depp or Gene Wilder, and nice and thoughtful like Charlie. He works for the legendary Texas grocery store HEB, and he's often bringing home treats like cookies, brownies, cakes, and pies. But he only ever eats a little bit, and the rest is always left to me, gobbling it up like Augustus Gloop. In the last year, I've slowly turned into Violet Beauregard, ballooning up like a giant blueberry, leaving me sitting on the couch, burping and farting like I stole fizzy lifting drink. It may be impossible for me to be tiny like Mike TV, but I say no. I don't care if the snozberry tastes like snozberry. I'm returning the everlasting gobstopper. I will be the Wonka at the end of the movie. I lose weight. I gain strength. I will not turn myself into an Oompa Loompa. I want the slightly skinnier, muscular physique I see in my pure imagination, and I want it now. I resist.
That was a very very nice. Is this a soliloquy? Is that the right word for
Yes,
that?
and written with no AI. That entirely came out of my brain this morning.
That was amazing. Um,
Yeah, shout out to the several other podcasts. The one that always sticks in my mind is the Las Culturistas, where they do I don't think so, honey segment and Tina Fey's epic rendition. That was what I was shooting for, but I hope it was funny.
Oh, it was good. Oh man. Okay, good. So, yeah, I mean, we wanted to talk about a few things, Jimmy. Maybe kind of set the table by, reflecting a little bit on your experience on the Austin City Council and your understanding of local politics in particular. We had some topics we had discussed yesterday that we wanted to touch on, but just to kind of set the scene, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you think about the power of local politics in the resistance movement to Trump and his enablers.
I think we all feel the frustration where you're fighting and resisting and organizing against what in many places, most places, is like a distant enemy. They're like we're really far away. And the reality is, as what we're seeing in Minneapolis, I think in some key ways, is the need to also be organizing your local government. And there are a lot of people that are doing it well, but I also think there's so much bigger opportunity to really lean in to your local electeds, be it city councils and mayors, be it county officials, school board members. In the way Texas is structured, all three of them govern very separate areas of local influence, and pressure them to do the right thing, and then support them when they do. I served on council for 4 years. I ran in three different elections and two runoffs to do so. It was a lot of work. And I can say that pretty much every council member in my experience is actively thinking about the next election. Who is going to have their back? Who's going to stand up for them? And what you have to make the point, you'll stand up for them if they stand up for you.
Mm.
The way that the Minneapolis Police Department was out doing press conferences talking about the problems that ICE was creating in that community. And then Governor Walz bringing in the National Guard. And yeah, you might say it was like political theater or whatever. National Guard handing out, I think it was hot cocoa and donuts in the one video that I saw.
Mhm.
But it was important. And a lot of politics is symbolism. The local government piece is, oh, it's like right there. And they're not strangers. They literally shop in the same grocery stores you shop in. Like, there's so much interesting, valuable work to be done there, and a lot of little wins. You don't always get the wins fighting at the national level, but there's a lot of little wins that can be had locally.
Nice. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on how local government has power over policing and how that connects to resistance to ICE and other pillars of support of the Trump regime.
Now, of course, I can only really speak to how Texas and cities in Texas are structured, but in my reading and knowledge, it's fairly similar across the country in that police forces are governed by the cities. And in Texas, there's a separate sheriff's department that is governed by the county. And in Texas, the sheriff is an elected position. So there are multiple elected officials to be working with, either on the city side with council and mayor, or on the county side with, in Texas, it's a commissioner's court or the sheriff, which are elected. And all of the little steps, all the little pieces that make a police department work are governed and decided by these bodies, by these elected officials. And true, there have been over time, at least in Texas, a slow, I will say, degradation of local control over policing, but they still pass the budget. They still set the salaries. They still decide who the next police chief is going to be when the last one is fired or retires. Police departments, and particularly police unions, talk about resist. They really resist oversight. I think that's pretty known. They don't want to be told how to do their jobs. Fairly, who does want to be told how to do their jobs? But when you're in public service, like, you're supposed to be told by the public. That's
Yeah.
kind of like the deal. So I have found in a lot of municipalities, particularly suburban communities, not so much in the major cities because there's a lot more activism and friction over these questions in the larger central municipalities, but people aren't really paying close of attention to the suburbs. And frankly, with gentrification and kind of white flight, like this reverse white flight has now occurred in a lot of cities where wealthier people are moving into central neighborhoods, gentrifying those neighborhoods, and then people of color being pushed out to the suburbs. It's definitely happening in Austin. And when you move out to a suburban community, you're dealing with a different police department who are hearing from different council members and hearing from different elected officials. And I would love to see more attention be paid to those groups because there are really good elected officials getting elected in these suburban communities. There are also some really bad ones.
Mm.
And those are the ones that become the MAGA sycophants in the next 2 or 3 election cycles. You know, you can somewhat inoculate your little area of the world against the next MAGA politician if you're really paying attention to not just the central town, but the suburban communities too.
So, kind of bringing it home, if ICE were to expand operations in, I don't know, some part of Texas, let's just say Austin, how would people, engage with local officials and local police personnel in order to resist the encroachment of ICE enforcement activities?
Well, one thing I would guide is do not assume that the elected official knows what you know. Sometimes I would experience this thing where people would come to me as a council member and they would be really mad that something was happening and they would be mad at me and I didn't even know the thing was happening. And then once I learned, I was like, great, let's work together and work on it. So building those relationships with your elected officials, not just when there's an emergency, but all the time, sets you up for that success for them to help you. The nature of ICE involvement will determine the nature of response. So if they're doing random raids, I mean, truly Berlin 1940 shit, right? If
Yeah.
they're doing random raids, that's going to be hard to respond to. That requires a lot more thoughtful pre planning with policing, level setting expectations by those elected officials to the police chief. But if there's like, we're seeing the purchase of warehouses by ICE,
Yeah.
you're seeing some success in local communities that once it's identified where this is going, there's all manner of land use regulation and permitting requirements that the federal government also has to follow. They're not absolved from building codes. So the key to that, though, in my experience, if you're doing this advocacy, is it's not to replace the screaming we rightfully do at senators and congresspeople, but build those relationships with your council members, with your county executive officials, so that when those things happening, they're hearing from you as a supporter, or if they're not a supporter, you're at least a paying attention community leader that has more influence than a flood of emails on the day that council votes. That's really the worst way to have influence. Do not wait for stuff to show up on a council agenda or a county agenda. Build those relationships, and then those electeds, the good ones, you'll quickly figure out which ones are the good ones. They'll come to you. They'll come to you
Mm.
before stuff hits agendas. Get your buy-in, get your input. You become a part of the policy making at the local level.
I love it. Yeah. So I'm hearing from you, so if you really want to make an impact on local decision making, not to be transactional, right? Like during an emergency, but to build a relationship with your elected officials. How do you do that? How do you build a relationship with elected officials? Like, is it, you request a meeting? Do you bring donuts? Like, what is it what is it that's key to building that relationship of trust?
I think it's a gentle introduction. Hey, my name is X. I'm one of your constituents. I have a couple of things going on in my neighborhood I'd like to talk to you about. Can I buy you a coffee? Can I get on the phone? 9 times out of 10, they're going to say yes. If you come gentle, like remember, like I said this before, but it is really important. Local elected officials really are just people, and they're dealing with the same set of emotions, fear and anxiety and joy and fun. So I I do think it's maybe not that true at Congress. I think you get into a bubble when you get that high, but at least for city councils and county electeds, it's really not so much of a bubble. Come gentle, start a dialogue. You can talk about the sidewalk in your neighborhood that's not been repaired. Like it
Mm.
doesn't have to be, don't you hate Trump like I hate Trump? It doesn't have to start there. Be a constituent of there. So in Austin, the city council is broken up into districts. Some cities, it's all one person. Most
Mm.
suburbs, it's all one. So it doesn't really matter which one you talk to. But being one of their voters helps. You say, I'm constituent. This is the neighborhood I live in. I'd love to talk to you about some of the things I'm seeing in my neighborhood. And then in those conversations, you can ask them, what do you think the city is doing to help protect us against ICE? What do you think the city should be doing?
Mm.
What are you, Council Member Jones? What are you doing that you need help with? How can we help you stop these ICE raids?
Mm. Mm. Mm.
You start
Nice.
to build that relationship, and then when the rubber meets the road, you're not a stranger. You're not a you can't be. They won't be convinced that you're an outside agitator. You're a real person who also talked about the pothole.
Mm. Mm. I see. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about the influence of citizens and residents can have in communities. What about local leaders themselves and the influence that they have in kind of shaping public narrative in the context of this like kind of broader authoritarian takeover?
Yeah, like I have. Well, I'll speak for myself. So when I was on council, I was I will say fairly pretty strident in my opinions, and I did not really hold back in saying what I thought was right. And I made some I think enemies is too strong, but we'll say dissenting voices that followed me around for a while. So But I wear those like a badge of honor. Not all local electeds are trying to be that person. And it is true that almost any elected body, you're going to have different people with different skill sets, and that's fine. Some people are going to be more comfortable in front of TV cameras. Some people are going to be more comfortable on social media. Some people just want to sit and work out an ordinance, work out the laws and the policies. So I think these local elected officials have a responsibility to speak out, to be posting frequently on social media, to be seeking out TV cameras so that there is no confusion what the values are of the community while all of this is going on around us. You can also demand that of them. Not everything is make money in the budget or fire the police chief. Sometimes the ask is do more interviews, get
Mm.
on podcasts. We want to see your face representing this city saying these things because this is what we believe. And if other people see elected officials say those things, that is part of the job, in my opinion, of being an elected official is representing the values of the community that elected you and not just the ones that voted for you, of the entire community. And that's what
Mm.
makes the job hard.
Who's doing a really good job at using the bully pulpit, so to speak, to help shape the narrative at the local level that comes to mind for you?
Some of it is circumstantial in like it to say like Mayor Frey in Minneapolis, like the problem came to him and then he
Yeah.
took to the microphone and did not pull punches. He said the thing.
Yeah.
And what's challenging about local government is you can also go into Mayor Frey's voting history over the last 10 years and find things you disagree with. There were points where he was more on the pro police side than the reform police side. But in this moment, he said the right thing. And I think that's valuable. There are other elected officials um, that I know. I think Congressman Kassar, who I served with on city council, I think was maybe the most savvy at doing that, and he led the council in many ways during those years. We did amazing stuff on criminal justice reform and housing reform when we were serving together, and now he's in Congress. He used that as a platform to
Yeah.
build his political career for the good. And believe me, I track every vote. He's not disappointed me once.
Good.
I track every vote. He's great. He's great. And someone I think a lot of people argue he's better in Congress
Hmm.
than in council, where city councils are also sometimes really boring. Sometimes it's like, well, which vendor are we hiring to replace the light poles? Like that's not as much of a crusading, energy. But um, there are, but it's going to be hard for any one person to know who are the good ones because I don't know when a council member in Dallas is doing it because it's only going to local media. So I've seen examples of it done well in Austin. I think we've seen a few examples of it done well nationally. We've also seen some poor examples. And there's a couple of clips that I've seen, like John Oliver use a couple of times. It was Mayor Lightfoot out of Chicago, and there was some criminal justice fracas that was going on. And she said this thing about, these people who are arrested, they're guilty. And then she realized what she said when she said it. She's like, well, I mean, of course, they get the presumption of innocence. So like, there are definitely ones that do it poorly, but and sometimes the electeds are in, we'll say, purpler areas where it's harder to be more strident, and it's the local community. You're the ones they represent. You have to decide amongst yourselves how strident you want your elected officials,
Yeah.
but you need to go and tell them. They
Yeah.
won't do it on their own.
So let's zoom out for a second, if we could, from the local to the kind of national or even global. What is your assessment about how the resistance to the Trump regime kind of dynamic is shifting and changing these days? What are you observing? What is interesting you about the changes in the movement?
I think we'll just take 2025 as a kind of set. I think in the beginning there was really thoughtful action around Tesla and Elon Musk, and it was happening broadly, and I think very powerful and galvanizing as a thing, in part, I think because it wasn't Trump. And it's there's like Trump fatigue, which is the challenge. He is the the symptom, but he's not the illness, right? And the Tesla protests, and you and I did a bunch of those, and they were
Hmm.
really successful, I thought, in not just making the point in Elon's backyard, but also building movements and getting people engaged and seeing new people. That was all great. What what I worry about is that we're too reactive
Mm.
and not proactive. So we like wait for the next controversy and then we run to that controversy instead of just sitting back and saying, I'm not going to be distracted by every controversy. This group, and this is something, Nev, that I think your team does really well, more so than a lot of groups, where you pick a thing or three or four things and you organize around that thing regardless of the noise.
Mm.
And you don't let the latest Stephen Bannon nonsense
Mm.
distract from undermining the pillars of support that are driving this fascism. Trump is the figurehead at the front of the bow of the ship, but he's not pulling the oars, right? We've got to take out the power that's behind him.
Yeah,
And if you just react to the flood the zone with shit stuff that Stephen Bannon has said 100 times, that you're playing into his model.
I got you.
And then the last thing that I think is good is nobody's given up on the Epstein files. And that's an area where they keep trying to flood the zone to get us off of those. And they haven't been successful there. There's probably three or four other things that we can't let them distract us from.
What are those three or four other things I want
I
to
mean,
know?
ICE is one, I think for
Yeah,
sure, right? Because they're pulling out of Minneapolis, so they say,
right, right.
but who really believes it, right? They're trying to go more underground with ICE. We can't take our foot off the gas pedal about the 10 degrees of separation from Nazi Germany that ICE represents. I think that's key. I think the financial corruption. It's so weird how it feels normalized. The billions of dollars that Trump's family is pocketing
It's
based off of
insane.
insider knowledge.
Yeah.
Did you see the thing? Have you followed any of this like poly market um like gambling on the news stuff?
I am
Are you
not.
familiar with
No,
that?
I know.
So I looked at it once. I was curious, and it was crazy. It was like people putting down bets on how long Caroline Levitt's press conference will be. And there was one, oh, there was one, the big one that made headlines was, will the US invade Venezuela, or was will you do something in Venezuela? And they showed that, if I'm remembering this news story correctly, they showed that the week before Trump sent the people into Venezuela to take out Maduro, some anonymous person made a gigantic bet that he would, just like a week before, and then made like $500,000 or something crazy.
That's
And then I
insane,
saw
man.
something similar that there was a bet about how long Caroline Levitt's press conference will be. And then there's, this may be fake, but there was, I think it's funny and emblematic. There was video of the the bet was like 5 minutes, something like that. And then there was video of like she was in the middle of taking a question and it was like 4:57, 4:58, 4:59. She goes, "Thank you," closes the book and walked out mid question.
That's a little suspect, I think.
Like, what?
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Like, I think we're all in agreement that people in Congress should not be trading stocks, but that is such small fish to the kind of corruption that is happening, led by the Trump administration and all of his fascist hangers on, which frankly are already billionaires. What? How much do you freaking need?
Yeah. I know. Wow. Um, well, it's America in 2026. It's a wild time. Um, I want to shift a little bit, Jimmy, to maybe kind of help the listeners kind of relax and kind of organize themselves around like a hopeful idea or hopeful message. And one thing that we occasionally ask guests on this podcast is related to this concept of wanting to drive your resistance not just with outrage but also with hope. And so one thing I like to ask guests on the podcast is where do you draw your sense of hope from in terms of like a better future? Where, if you have that, where does it come from, and what do you think about when you hope for a better future?
That's such a great question, and it's so important. I have, I think a lot of us, we go through cycles. I've been in some depressive cycles about the world at large, but I am right now on a high. I am hopeful. I am feeling good. I am seeing the response to the Epstein files, and people are not letting it go. People who are Republicans, which to be fair, I expect they will still vote Republican, but they're at least saying the thing. That's different.
Mm,
That's different than 2025. That stuff is changing. That has given me hope. I still remain hopeful about the younger generation. I met a woman who, this was maybe 6 months ago, and she had just retired from teaching and she was going into personal training or some other profession. And she was lamenting about how terrible the next generation is. I think she was maybe a middle school teacher. And I had to push back her, and I was like, I don't know, girl. Like, sure, some of these kids, they're struggling. They're kind of COVID kids, and there's a lot of problems there. But if you really talk to them, certainly the ones that are kind of middle to upper results in their classes. I mean, these kids are smart and they're conscientious. I don't think I said that right. And they're thinking about the world. They care about their fellow man. There's hope to be had in the next generation. And I really lean into that. And then just the ranked political stuff, that special election that happened in Fort Worth in Tarrant County,
mm,
where it was like a plus 17 Trump that flipped into, I think, a plus 15 for the Democrat in the special. Now, granted, special elections really, do not predict
mm,
generals,
mm,
but that's a hell of a swing.
mm,
And seeing, my hope, I think, just on the ranked politics and campaign side, it sits in the hubris of the right. Their gerrymandering scheme, I think, will backfire. I think they've over gerrymandered Texas. In a year, they couldn't afford to do it. They based those maps on 24 Trump,
mm,
but they're not getting 24 Trump electorate in 26. And yes, we have to worry about the SAVE Act. We have to worry about the voter suppression and intimidation. And will there be ICE people carrying guns at polls? Yes, all that stuff's to be worried about. I'm not dismissing any of that. But I think we're going to pick up some seats. I think there's an outside chance we get back the Senate.
mm,
And just imagine if you want to sit in a, like, we can defeat fascism moment. I think about the hearings a Democratic Congress can have in
mm.
January, February, and March of 2026, where we might actually see the find out phase, which is what we're all looking for. That
Mess around
that
and
is
find
a
out.
lot of where that is where I am holding my hope right now.
Cool. I love that. That's like a great image and vision to imagine for early next year. I love that. Cool. Well, folks, I think that we're probably at the end of today's podcast. I just want to thank you, Jimmy, for joining me today on Rise and Resist. Always a pleasure to talk to you, sir. Folks, we are the Resist Trump campaign, and again, we coach activists to lead lawful, nonviolent civil resistance to Trump and his enablers. Please check us out at resisttrump.us and have a great rest of your week. Thanks again, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Bye.